So, Beth, we're going to be talking about overactive bladder and bladder retraining today. Could you tell me a little bit about overactive bladder and talk about some typical symptoms we may expect if we're suffering from it?
Yeah, so there are two types of urinary incontinence. Stress urinary incontinence and overactive bladder and urgency or urge incontinence. And today we're going to be focusing a bit more on the urgency, but stress incontinence is if we think about something that involves some exertion, so jumping up and down, coughing, sneezing, and then subsequently leaking. So that's when we've got an increase in pressure in our tummy, but the mechanism that controls that doesn't work quite as well, and then we subsequently leak. Whereas urgency and overactive bladder and frequency is where we tend to feel like we need to go to the toilet more frequently, we're going to the toilet more frequently, and potentially we're not able to hold on, so we might then be leaking with that.
Perfect. And can you tell me a bit about a normal bladder and how a normal bladder would function?
So typically a bladder should be quite calm and relaxed as it's filling. A bladder is partly a muscle, so it is able to contract and relax, and we shouldn't really be receiving those messages that we need to empty our bladder until it's getting much fuller, and typically if we're able to control our bladder well, we don't need to respond to those initial messages, but if we've got an overactive bladder, then it's stiffer, it's not able to retain quite as much fluid normally, and it starts to contract much more than it otherwise would, and then that drives that urgency.
Okay, and why might I start suffering with overactive bladder symptoms? What are the main causes?
So there may be a number of causes. Typically it is more likely to happen as we age, and specifically as women reach perimenopause, because changes in estrogen can affect our bladder. So that tends to be a time that this can emerge, or is more likely to emerge, but it can happen to us at any age.
Okay, and what can I do about it?
So there's loads of things that can be done, and a lot of those interventions are what we call conservative, so don't require more significant intervention. They include pelvic floor exercises, which we can obviously help you with as a physio, and then something called bladder training or bladder retraining, and essentially that is trying to look at the typical habits that you might have developed and how your bladder is behaving, and trying to gradually over a period of time extend that time that you can hold on for, so delaying the void. Now, this can seem really quite challenging to start with, but over a period of 12 weeks we've got good evidence to show that this can be really quite effective, and you can factor in what triggers you think might be affecting you, and also look at things like what you're drinking as well, in order to help.
Perfect. Thanks, Beth.